So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on how to address GDPR with data-centric security. My name is Felix Rosbach and I'm a product marketing manager here at COMFORTE. And today presenting with me is Warren Postman.
Hi, yes, I'm Warren Postman, and I am a solutions architect at COMFORTE, and I work with our customers worldwide on their concerns about data protection.
Thank you, Warren. So the question is, why is a data-centric security strategy important for GDPR compliance? And let's start with a few thoughts on GDPR. This statement here was made by McKinsey in April 2018, just a few weeks before GDPR came into place. And it's interesting because at that time, there was really no company that felt fully prepared for the GDPR. And that was independent of the size of the company or the investment they made in compliance. And the question is, how does it look like today? Did that change? Experts say that businesses are still scrambling to put compliance measures into place. And after talking with a lot of risk managers, with a lot of CISOs, we also experienced that only a few companies feel fully prepared for a potential audit. They all expect the gaps to remain in their infrastructure. And looking at the articles and rules that GDPR comes with, there's a lot of work to do, especially when it comes to larger companies and enterprises with hundreds of thousands of endpoints, a complex network from mobile devices to servers. There's a lot of work to do to comply to GDPR. So GDPR is an ongoing challenge, a continuing challenge. The impact of GDPR when it comes to fines is really big. This is really nothing to ignore. This can hurt a company. But also the organizational challenges remain, which means that GDPR is not only about the IT, it's also about the processes that you design around data. There can come a lot of requests from a range of stakeholders, like clients and regulators, but also interest groups and media, especially when it comes to a breach. And these stakeholders can ask you how you handle the personal data of your customers, how you handle breaches, how you deal with crisis. So there's really a lot of things to do to make sure that all these processes are properly set up. And as the users and clients become more aware of their rights and more concerned about the use of their personal data, the number of these requests will increase. That can also be a challenge for larger organizations. And of course, the IT implementation is still underway. It is really hard to comply 100% on every single system. The implementation of countermeasures is very costly and often very complex. A lot of companies adopted so-called stopgap solutions to make sure they are ready for May 25th, but these solutions aren't that sustainable. Sometimes they have to be exchanged, sometimes they have to adapt to the changing data landscape. And that's a logical thing, that the data landscape changes over time with your company, with the business. So you have to make sure that the solutions that are GDPR compliant today are also GDPR compliant in the future. And all that means a lot of work for your company, and that on an ongoing basis. So someone could say, as long as you don't get an audit, GDPR doesn't seem to be that big of a problem. But there's one main question you have to keep in mind. What if you get breached? What about being in the media for that? The probability of getting breached increases every year. And looking at the numbers, we see that by 2002, probably the number of criminal data breaches increases by 200%. This year, in 2018, 6 out of 10 organizations experienced a data breach, discovered a data breach in their network. That means this is really something to look for. And if you look at these numbers, privacy has never been more important than today. So how does data-centric security help you with these challenges? How does it help you to get compliant or stay compliant? Warren, can you tell us more about data-centric security?
Sure, yeah, and in fact, if you haven't heard about data-centric security, it's one of the great things about the way that we use data today and the way that we need to protect it, that it kind of works together. So really what I think everyone that's listening will agree is that somebody is in your organization is spending money somewhere on protecting the organization. Typically, it's going to be one of the items you see here, whether it's at the firewall, whether it's at a DLP solution, whether it's a DevOps like solution to protect your, development infrastructure, to ensure that your code base is pure, whatever it may be. There's something happening, but what these are really trying to do is trying to protect you against what or what the vendors that you've used know about, and that's great. However, the unfortunate thing is that there's always someone that learns there's a new problem because there's a different advance, a different hack, a different angle. So these sort of perimeter type defenses, it's not, it's never going to be possible to do 100% protection. It's just, you can have a good, strong, in-depth security, but it's just not possible to make it impossible. The real way that we look at it is that it's not, since it's not sufficient just to protect the outside, it's really looking at what is it that you're protecting, that's on the inside, and that's really where data-centric security comes in. It's interesting that you may wish to prevent someone from getting in through a firewall, but then if they were to get in, or after they get in, what happens, right? That's really the the threat today, because they're going after the data that's inside. They're not really interested in your firewall. They're not really interested in your email system. They're interested in the data that you have on your servers, your applications are using, your Hadoop cluster has in it, all of these types of systems that process and move data, because in a data-driven economy, that really is the crown jewels. So honestly, the protection of the actual data is really what you're after. So protecting it from the outside versus protecting the actual data, and that's what data-centric security does. So if you think about it, the options are based on where you're at and what type of data you have, right? So if you look at the type of data that is in your infrastructure, it's going to be any amount of different types of data, but it's going to fall into one of those categories on the left. And it doesn't matter what vertical you're in, because each one of the companies out there have some amount of this data, whether it's personal, financial data, or PCI data. Any of this data is going to be maintained, and the location, the places where it's stored, it doesn't really matter either, because at the end of the day, you have this data, it's in your databases, you're using it internally, and it's necessary for your business, because after all, you wouldn't be taking the data if you didn't have to. So the idea is actually to provide the data-centric model, which will allow you to protect the data as it exists, as you use it. So at rest, in motion, in use. And that allows you to maintain the use of your data, but for a hacker, for someone from the outside, someone that's unauthorized, or someone that's inside that is accessing data in a manner they're not supposed to be accessing it, then it's really addressing this threat vector to prevent that from happening. In that, if I get at your data, it's actually been protected, and so that social security number, that tax ID number, that credit card number, that email address, the name, the street address, the phone number, any of these geolocation coordinates, call data records, all of these things are going to contain data, but when you use data-centric model, it's actually going to contain something different. It's going to contain what we call a token. So tokenization, which is simply swapping one value for another, is a way of protecting data that would allow you to maintain the look and the feel of the data without losing its analytic value. So, other methodologies such as, say, in standard encryption, you would lose that sort of ability because the data no longer is usable. The fields change in length. The analytic value is lost because you have to decrypt it in order to use it. So with tokenization, you can actually use the token in lieu of unprotecting it, giving you that end-to-end protection, so that when it's sitting in my database, the token is sitting there. If an attacker gets in, they're looking at a token, and by the way, I can use those tokens as well for my analytic value. And if and only if I really need to see the source value, I could always reverse it. But the key thing is that sensitive data is being protected, and it's persistent and pervasive no matter where the data is used, or if it's moved, or which database or file it resides in. So what COMFORTE does with tokenization is actually very sophisticated to give you the largest amount of protection for any type of data. So our algorithm, which is the basis of the ANSI tokenization X9 standard, is able to create a value that is both protected but also secure. So meaning that someone can't guess one token from another, for instance, and it's guaranteed to be collision free. It also supports any type of data format in any of the Western European languages, given that your data is going to contain all types of different elements. You could think of it as any text can be protected quite simply by our tokenization strategy. The other element that's important is the fact that we generate this tokenization table, which is giving you the ability to tokenize any data without us having to store the data for you. So we can statelessly generate tokens as on demand necessary. So that means we're not having to create a large honeypot of data that an attacker would also want to look at. We securely manage a tokenization table and our algorithm to allow to provide this service for you internally without you having to worry about a large data set of customer data that you have to manage. So scalability is baked right in, and security is top notch as verified externally. So the important thing here is that tokenization is a technology that COMFORTE uses, and that's the means to to the end. But that's not the full amount of the story. Honestly, you have lots of organizations that are out there that have lots of different technologies, and all of these technologies are not as easy to use as they're advertised. So the ease of integration is critical. It's not just how good the solution is, and we at COMFORTE recognizes that. So we have lots of different options, whether it's a standard API integration or whether it's a transparent integration that allows you to pass data through and have it protected without modifying applications. The key is that it's whatever works in your environment. And the number one thing to keep in mind is that the data is going to be securely tokenized and protected, so that when you store it in your database and then that data moves to other databases, or if it moves to a cloud-based service, any location that it ends up at or any place that it's used, that token will go with it, because it's replacing that sensitive data with the token. So therefore, the protection is inherited. So if you ingest data from a customer and you tokenize it immediately, with our transparent integration methods, and then move it downstream to your analytics, to your big data or Hadoop style environments, then that would give you the option to inherit that protection across the entire enterprise. Therefore, as we would say, minimizing your attack surface and protecting that critical element of your organization, the crown jewel, your data.
Thank you, Warren. So after talking about data-centric security and tokenization for a few moments, let's take a look at the benefits for your GDPR compliance. So with the right data-centric security, you ensure GDPR compliance, especially when it comes to Articles 5 and 6, 25 and 32, as these are talking about the proper protection of personal data. With that, you can avoid big fines and build trust with your customers. And what is really interesting about tokenization or proper data-centric security is that you can keep systems out of scope, which means if systems like help desk centers, for example, are able to work with the protected data, if they don't have to see the whole thing in the clear, you can keep these systems completely out of the GDPR scope. And what is also interesting is that there's no obligation to disclose the breach if the data is properly protected. So GDPR states that if you protect the data in a way that the hackers can't do anything with it, you don't have to disclose the breach. And of course, it's a sustainable compliance. It can grow with your company. It adapts to the changing data landscape. It's really scalable. And as there are more and more GDPR-like laws and regulations are coming into play, it is really important to implement a sustainable compliance strategy. So what next? Talk to us about specific use cases, secure DevOps with protected test data, compliance for call center and help desk operations, or big data projects. If you want to learn more about the capabilities, the architecture, or the integration options of this solution, get in touch with us via our website or contact us directly. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate your listening, and thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you next time.